told you. When I made the route, I told you.
Said there was elevation.
So it turned out that elevation was only one of the unique characteristics of this bike ride. But let's start back at the beginning. We were heading out for our 4th annual Nutmeg Nor'Easter in Connecticut. A couple days of riding and camping hosted by Ronnie Romance. First, we had to stop and get coffee, obviously, Asterisk Coffee Roasters in Kyoga Falls, and then we're off on the road. What we always do is plan a side trip on the way out there, somewhere to stop, because it's a little bit of a hike for us, so we don't have to be in the car that long. So we always go somewhere unique. This was my first Wawa experience, kind of the sheets of the East, as I gather. We were staying at a KOA, so we checked in our cabin first. We were supposed to be staying in this covered wagon, but apparently it was under maintenance. I don't know. Ben thought maybe they put it too close to the teepees. So the KOA was in the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area. We were going to ride down to the trailhead for the McDade Trail and ride it, but when we were driving in, we saw the roads we'd have to be on. They were a little busy, no shoulders, and we just decided we would go down to the trailhead, which turned out to be a really good idea because then we got to ride more of the trail. And as you could see right here, the trail was not some kind of typical rail trail. Right off the bat, we were climbing steep hills, actually. There are a couple times where we actually had to get off the bike and walk. We had parked at the southern end of the trail, the Hialeah Trailhead, I believe it's called. As always, the Strava's down below if you want to see exactly where we rode and you want to do it yourself, because I don't have all the answers. I'm not from this area. But the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area is kind of a 40-mile stretch of the Delaware River. I'll get into the history of that a little bit more, but I believe the trail runs almost the entire length, and you only have to jump out on the road a couple times. As you can see, and it'll be a theme of this video, this is just not your typical bike path rail trail. The surface here is not crushed limestone or anything like that. This is a true gravel path. So we were glad, we loved this. You could see the descents and the climbs and the surface, but we were on bikes that were ready for being out in New England and riding rocky and rough stuff that Ronnie Romance had planned. So for us, it worked out great, and it was a huge, pleasant surprise. One thing we talked about a number of times is if you had just showed up on a road bike or a hybrid bike, or you're just a family thinking you're just going for a typical bike ride, you would be wrong. Yeah, there is one of the gradients that I did not even make it up. I tried to and went off to the side and had to put a foot down. And so even when this trail is not going up and down, it is going side to side and curving around, so it's really pretty. You're up on bluffs overlooking the Delaware River, and then sometimes you're curving around farm fields and things like that. So just really cool, great scenery. You could tell we're here at the perfect time of year. Just enough of the leaves were gone that you would get those river views, but there was still enough that they were really pretty and there was a lot of color out here. The website for the trail does rate the sections between each trailhead from easy to difficult, but I think most people would have in mind that meant a little bit of climbing and not really take into account the surface. This is one of those surfaces, I know people say you could ride anything on any bike. That's true. I think, 38s would probably be the minimum I'd want to be on. 42s would be more comfortable. I was riding 55s. You can't ride tires too wide on a trail like this, in my opinion. But yeah, just something to be conscious of. This is not really a road bike route. This is one of the trailheads here. I don't know if the trail went somewhere else or if this is where you were supposed to go through, but that's where we went through anyways. So there was water along the way, and then if you went even farther down the trail, there is a place to camp. Someone has already commented on my Strava about there's a way to make a great 50-mile loop out of this by crossing the river and hitting some other spots. So if you are going to come out here, and if you're in the area, you should definitely explore some of the options. We ended up riding 15 miles out and then just riding the same route right back. We ended up with 1,500 feet of elevation, and that includes, I think about a section of 4 miles along the farm fields that was flat, so total of 8 miles that was flat, to give you an idea of that when you're climbing, you really are climbing. We did pass a few joggers, a couple of hikers. We didn't see any other bikes while we were out here. There were even a few hunters out there, so that's something to be aware of in hunting season. They were wearing the bright colors and the hunting vests and all that stuff. Still on the way back when it was getting a little darker, it was a little unsettling, but I that's the way it goes. I believe it's legal out here, so hopefully they're keeping an eye out. I just turned on my headlight as a flasher once we noticed that was going on, and it didn't need my headlight actually for light yet. So always a good idea to have lights with you for situations like this, especially because most of us are usually wearing all black. Yeah, so there's some bridges, there's some boardwalks. We were smiling. We just kind of couldn't believe it. Like I said, it was totally unexpected. Like I said, not 100%. Erin had showed the elevation on the routes she had sent, and she had a couple different options. But one of the things we were going to do was go down to a brewery, and we also thought we were riding from the campsite originally. So in my mind, all the elevation was to where we were camping, because we were kind of camping up in the mountains a little bit. That's where the KOA was. So I looked at the profile, but I didn't study it like usual. So yeah, it was really surprising. And then as you can see, this is a switchback section that takes you up a climb, and it's a challenge. So yeah, really cool, really unique experience. And one of those where you just go out, you think you're going on a typical ride, and we were just going to chill and ride like 40, 50 miles. And instead we were kind of trying to figure out how to describe it really. We're thinking it's like somewhere between gravel and mountain biking, or parts of it are like mountain biking on gravel. If you've ridden this trail, how would you describe it? Let me know down below. So I've heard of the Delaware Water Gap before, but I've never been to the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area. So it was interesting to learn a bit about it. As mentioned, it's centered on this 40-mile stretch of river, and the big defining feature is the mountain pass, or the gap, where the Delaware River goes through the mountains. But how the area became a park is kind of interesting, and maybe depending on who you are, kind of sad. So in 1966, the federal government decided that they were going to build a big dam. It was going to create something like a 35-mile reservoir, and it was going to be for flood control and hydroelectric power. They created the park based on where the new shorelines would be, and then they started using eminent domain. It's estimated that 15,000 people were removed through eminent domain, and that 3,000 to 5,000 structures and outbuildings were torn down, and this includes colonial history and Native American sites. So remaining locals and environmental groups started to protest the idea of the dam, and in 1978 the federal government canceled the plans. The land was then transferred from the Army Corps of Engineers to the Park Service. It's interesting because a lot of where my videos are is the Kyoga Valley National Park, which most of the time I was growing up was the Kyoga Valley National Recreation Area. So I believe recreation areas are one step below national parks in protection, and then below that would be national forests. Someone could correct me on that if I'm wrong. But so I'm familiar with kind of how this all goes, as when I was growing up, there was still a lot of abandoned structures that people were eminent domained out of, and I even had friends who were still living in the park and then were later kicked out of the park, or their leases ended, and I still have a couple friends who are there. So that's, as you're seeing these abandoned buildings here, is kind of probably what happened, is people were kicked out. All these structures have not been torn down yet. There was a ton of deferred maintenance in the Kyoga Valley, and over the last few years it seems like the federal government has invested much more and has cleaned up a lot of the sites that were still there. Here, there is $161 million of deferred maintenance, so that is another reason you'll probably see so many structures. We made a wrong turn there. There's not actually a bridge on the trail that goes down to the river, so we had to come back around and jump out on the road here. There are a couple crossings with hiking trails and even a couple gravel roads on the section we rode, but it was still pretty easy to navigate the trail. You wouldn't need a GPX file or anything like that, I wouldn't think. So anyways, on the parks, I'm always glad when land is preserved and everyone can enjoy it. This park sits, in the area of a really dense population, the New York City metro region, and just really developed. So there's all this green space for people to enjoy. But again, I think it's always worth remembering that it was at the expense of other people, and I never forget that when I'm enjoying the Kyoga Valley here at home either. we pulled off the trail a couple times to check out the river. I wanted to take photos. It was just absolutely beautiful. We were all taking photos. You know, sunset, fall foliage. The Delaware River is just really, really pretty. Dylan was turning around there to session this little bump that we saw. So I think Ben got some good photos of him hitting it pretty good. Aaron turned around slightly before me, Ben, and Dylan did. I wanted to go a little farther because on the map it looked like there was another river view. The sun was getting pretty close to setting and I wanted to get some more photos down there. So we just turned around probably only maybe a mile later and then caught back up with her down the road a little bit here. This trail and the sunset and the perfect fall timing turned out to be absolutely amazing. Really, really beautiful. Even when we had to put our bike lights on, you'll see there's a little bit of twilight that was really stunning as the stars came out. Something a GoPro can't really capture, obviously. But really, really awesome ride. Perfect time of day. After this ride, we ended up going over to Shawnee Craft Brewing, which was part of a golf course and ski resort, it seemed like. Had really, really cool outdoor spaces. As mentioned, the sun was already down by that point, so I didn't really get any photos, but we went there and had some pizza for dinner and all that kind of thing. And then we were back to the KOA to spend the night. There's a lot of fire bans in the east right now, so we didn't even actually check on firewood or anything like that. So not a big deal. It was already getting a little on the later end, and we decided to get to bed. We wanted to get to Nutmeg right when it opened at noon and pick a good spot to camp for the weekend. So perfect first day of our trip. It was going to be a week-long vacation for me, Thursday to Thursday. We're all going to end up doing something a little bit different. But yeah, this is just part one. There is probably going to be about 5 videos in this series, as this trip just had a bunch of different moving parts. If you watched my last video, I showed what I packed and why I packed what I packed. So I'll also do a breakdown as it goes on of what worked for me and what didn't, and maybe there'll even be a final wrap-up video if you guys have a lot of questions over this series. So our drive the next morning when we started out was absolutely beautiful. There was a fog in the Delaware River Valley, just really pretty. I usually don't show a ton of car footage, but I just thought this stuff looked really cool. You know, besides the fact that I don't like being in the car for long periods of time and I pretty much hate driving anymore, the drive out east every year always turns out to be really, really pretty. It's just, you know, driving through the Alleghenies at this time of year is pretty nice. This coffee shop, Cafe Wren, was great in Milford, by the way, if you ever find yourself in the area. All right, so that'll about do it for this one. As you can see, we were over the Hudson Valley and then into Killingworth, Connecticut for Nutmeg. If you like this kind of content, like I said, 5-6 videos out of my vacation, consider becoming a channel member. Thanks as always for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Peace.